So we're going to move into something we don't get to do too often, but it's happened at least a few times in my time since I've been on council, including when I was first appointed to council in 2005. Was in a 3-2 vote after a couple of rounds. I then went on to lose my election that year by 15 votes. So shows you what council knew. But then I went on to win every election after that. So shows you what the voters knew the first time around. I know Councilor Mellon was appointed in a vote just like this and had to go through what is sort of an uncomfortable interview in public. So we appreciate what you're doing here. And the deputy mayor was also rejected by council, but then won an election later that year. So so thank you all for being here this evening. And for those who are here and may not know all of the candidates, I'll run down the line from my right to my left. Ethel Carrier, James Evans, Rachel James, Craig Kozlerich, and Robert Mitchell Shiles Jr., who prefers to go by Mitch. And if anybody else has a nickname that you prefer, please let us know. The way this will proceed this evening is that I will begin by asking the candidates questions that they actually provided answers to in writing, so they can present them orally here tonight. I'll do that in alphabetical order, and then we will have an opportunity for council members to ask any follow-up questions after that. And what we'll do is we'll sort of rotate through. I'll do my best to keep track of that so that everybody gets an opportunity to give a first answer for as long as there are questions. After that has been completed, and you'll have 3 minutes for those follow-up questions. After that has been completed, council will then move to a vote by ballot after nominations have been made. Do the candidates have any questions? Okay. For the necessity of ensuring that you're all qualified, although we have your applications, you've all been residents of the borough for at least 1 year since today. Okay. And you're all registered voters of the borough. Okay. Then we will proceed. Ms. Carrier, you will be first, and the first, and I'll remind you of each of the questions. So the first question is, why do you want to serve on the Carlisle Borough Council?
Well, I've been a longtime resident of Carlisle. I've been very active in the community. I've done a lot of volunteer work and continue to do volunteer work. And I think I can do a lot to contribute to the Borough Council. I do read a lot. I do see what other communities are doing, and I have a lot of suggestions for improvements that should not cost a lot of money to implement.
Thank you for your answer. Mr. Evans, same question. Why do you want to serve on the Carlisle Borough Council?
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, audience. I want to serve on the Borough Council because I want to represent the people of Carlisle. Too often people don't have a voice, or that voice doesn't make it to where it needs to be appropriately addressed. And I want to be the voice for those people, but not only those people, the people that already have a voice, and be able to bring that to the council meeting and have frank discussions about even uncomfortable topics that some people may or may not like to talk about, but that's what we need in borough government to be able to solve problems and make this a better place for people to live, work, play, and attract and grow the community in a responsible manner that benefits everyone, regardless of your socioeconomic class or ideology or where you sit. That's what I believe that I can bring and fight for that, even if I do ruffle feathers. That's what I want to do, is be that voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Ms. James, same question. Why do you want to serve on Carlisle Borough Council?
Yes, sir. Thank you all for coming. My interest in serving for Borough Council really is twofold. One is my passion and interest in serving the Carlisle community at large. And then the second kind of goes in tandem with the fact that I believe my skill sets and individual passions really align well with Borough Council. So I moved here to attend Penn State Dickinson Law roughly 4 years ago. And at that point, I came here and I was terrified. I knew no one, absolutely nothing about Pennsylvania. And Carlisle really opened me and welcomed me with open arms and the support of the community. And in my educational journey and henceforth, I've had the opportunity really to see the depth of this community. I volunteer with numerous organizations, which I can elaborate on later in the Carlisle community. And through this, I've been able to see not only the unique needs, but the unique opportunities Carlisle has as a municipality. And I was taught that if something gives you so much, you have to return that in favor. Which kind of brings me to my second point, which is that just individually, I think my skill set and my passions kind of align with serving Borough Council in this capacity. I have a degree in political science and a background in municipal law and public policy. I'm kind of a self proclaimed nerd. And so, with that interest and that passion, I can see how service aligns with serving the Carlisle community in this capacity. Thank you.
Mr. Krauserich, do you need me to repeat the question?
I do not.
You got it. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, members of the council, members of the public. I first took notice of the Borough Council in recent years based on some agenda items that have been enacted by the Borough Council. I think too often we think of local government as, well, just provide services and keep the costs under control, balance the budget. And that is a big portion of what municipalities do. But in recent years, this council has shown an ability and a willingness to expand the agenda into quality of life items. I'm referring to the Human Relations Commission, which was created in 2016 to enforce the non-discrimination ordinance. I'm proud to live in Carlisle as a community that is friendlier to our LGBT residents than state law or federal law as a whole would otherwise provide. I'm referring also, of course, to the 2020 cannabis decriminalization ordinance passed by this board, which seeks to mitigate the injustices wrought by prohibition. And in the spirit of expanding the quality of life agenda, expanding what local government can be beyond just public safety and trash pickup and all of the very necessary services, in the spirit of that, I would like to see the borough do more to address the very unfortunate growing problem of unhoused individuals in our community, and to do so with compassion for those individuals. Being a local government, we are, of course, limited in terms of authority and budget. So the idea would be that there are resources, state, county, federal resources to address the causes of homelessness, which are many. There can be many different causes of homelessness. It can be substance use disorder, mental illness, domestic violence, and just good old poverty. And there are federal, state, and county resources to address each of those. And I would like to see the borough do a better job of matching the resources to the needs of the individuals. Because anecdotally, I hear all the time, this is a growing problem in our community. And if we can address it with compassion for the individuals, that it not only improves their lives, but improves the perception of Carlisle as a good place to live, which it is.
Thank you. Mr. Shiles.
I'll just read sort of verbatim what I have. Why do I want to serve on Borough Council? Well, the planet is changing and Carlisle must change with it. 2023 was globally the hottest year ever directly measured by human beings, and based on the paleoclimate data, the hottest in the past 10,000 years. 2024 will probably be even hotter. We can hope that this is just an anomalous period with the added effects from solar cycles, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and from cuts in sulfate emissions. Regardless, these past 2 years represent our future and will still be some of the coolest years of this century. Sao Tome and Principe is an island nation in the Atlantic off the coast of Africa, a former Portuguese colony. It has a population of just over 227,000. Its total annual emissions in 2022 were 262.4 metric kilotons, much less than the 350 metric kilotons of the estimated annual emissions in Carlisle's greenhouse gas inventory. Yet our inventory does not take into full account greenhouse gases, which are emitted on our behalf through our consumption of material objects produced elsewhere, nor the emissions from our diet. I want to serve on Borough Council because we have a narrow window of opportunity to address our planet heating emissions. And I believe that the best path forward is in lifting from the bottom by finding solutions that not only solve emissions, but solve problems for the most vulnerable in our community. Solutions that are both accessible, equitable, and make our lives better as a community.
Thank you. The next question, neglected to mention that you have 5 minutes for each of these questions, but you've all been great and have been under 5 minutes. So, Ms. Carrier, next question to you is, what prior experience can you bring to Borough Council that will benefit the Carlisle community?
Well, first of all, I worked almost 35 years for the old AMP Incorporated, which got bought out and had several name changes. But I started out working in the factory as a die repair person. I went through the tool and die apprenticeship program and then landed up finishing up my career as a global quality engineer. I've done a lot of, I was on the planning commission for 8 years. I was in that group that was the initial rollout for the Borough Recycling Committee. I was on the Cumberland County Task Force for Open Space. Of course, that all got ignored. And I currently do a lot of volunteer work with the U.S. Army War College, working with the international fellows. Each year I sponsor a international officer. I just finished up my mentorship with Big Brothers Big Sisters. My little sister graduated high school, so she went out and aged out of the program. So I bring to a lot of nonprofit and also government volunteer work. I think as a quality engineer, my focus was always on improvement.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Carey. Mr. Evans, what prior experience can you bring to Borough Council that will benefit the community of Carlisle?
I'll give you this little bit of mouthful here with how I listed out, but I'll expand on it. I can bring 34 plus years of analytical planning, military operations, intelligence, security, government, cultural, and liaison experience, and then 50 years of my life, 50 plus years of my life living on this, around this globe. That's what I can bring. I'm retired military. I worked with the federal government after I retired from the military. I've lived in 40 plus countries around the world, some not by choice, but you learn a lot when you live in certain countries and in combat zones. You learn the culture, you learn the locales, you learn the people, and what that gives you is an understanding of humans and human nature and how it operates. Now, I know we're talking about here in the U.S. and in Carlisle, we have a large international community here, not only at the War College, but people that move here, different ways that people look at things. So I think what I bring from all that experience of solving problems, I know some of the things that I was involved in are not popular war, but you understand the critical things that need done to save human life, to make human life better, and to make areas better. So I think that experience around the globe, interacting with people, getting honest feedback, giving feedback, learning the nuanced things that motivate people to live, is what I think that I can bring to this borough council and benefit the community. One of the things that I actively do, I moved back from Europe here in late 2021, was getting myself established back at my parents' home. I'm a native of Carlisle and came back. But what I've learned is to walk the streets and talk to everybody, take time, regardless of who they are, and get feedback. And when people have problems, I'm ready to go to battle for those people, to fight for their problems. I don't like seeing people get raked over the coals. I don't like seeing people abused, um, for anything. But especially, I've seen a lot of people that have, with the housing issue here in Carlisle, get kind of taken advantage of. There's a lot of, it may not be popular, but there's some people that do slumlord type things here, or there's people that are taken advantage of, or there's drug problems. And I think having those conversations and the experience that 30 plus years and what I've done is I'm able to understand those people and try to get that message to the right people and bring people together. One example was, some people protested here at a previous borough meeting. I gave some people a different perspective. They talked to me afterwards, and I think that's what I can bring, based on that experience that I have, knowledge, and just working with people. I know I'm rough around the edges, but I really honestly will sit down and I want to work with everybody to make this place the best place that it can be. And I think it can be better. Everybody is doing a good job, but you always set the bar higher and you don't set a mediocre bar. You can make this such a great place that it's the shining beacon in South Central PA or the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. James, what prior experience can you bring to Borough Council that will benefit the Carlisle community?
Yes, sir. I kind of broke this up into three categories: academic, professional, and then community. Just starting briefly with academic, like I said, I have a background in political science and public policy. So I have experience drafting legislation, understanding the impact of ordinances and legislation on local government. I also have my Juris Doctorate from Penn State Dickinson Law, which kind of moves me into professional, which is that I actually practice in municipal law currently. So I'm well aware of how weedsy it can get, especially when it comes to zoning ordinances. I actually have experience and have worked with a former member of Housing and Urban Development to do a comparative analysis of municipalities across the Commonwealth, specifically targeting accessory dwelling units, which I know is of interest to the Carlisle Borough. So I can bring that experience with me. Furthermore, I just understand that as we, as a Carlisle Borough, operate under a home rule charter, there are some unique rules and considerations to keep in mind with that. And then moving into my third and favorite category is that I have community experience and personal relationships that I think make me qualified for this position. Throughout my time at Dickinson Law, I served on the outreach committee. And then after I graduated, I had the opportunity to kind of really enrich myself with some key organizations. I really just finished my term with Project Share. I served on the Fair for Share committee. For those who don't know, Project Share is a food pantry here in Carlisle, and we plan that food truck festival that happens over the summer. I also am currently serving on a panel for the United Way. I was on the Carlisle Pride Committee and helped plan an event for that. I have also volunteered with the YWCA, the YMCA, the SPY program, etc. And all that to say really is that has given me the unique opportunity to connect with the very people we espouse to serve, which I think is the heart of servant leadership and the goal of borough council is that you can't lead and you can't legislate if you don't know the people you claim to lead. And so it's that experience and those personal connections that I can bring to borough council and that I think would make me an applicable fit for borough council. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kalzarich, what prior experience can you bring to Borough Council that will benefit the Carlisle community?
Well, Carlisle has been very good to me. It's been about 20 years since I first set foot in Carlisle. At that time, I was a college student. I was attending a conference at Dickinson College, and little did I know that this would be the community where I complete my education, build a career, and buy a home. And here we are 20 years later. I've been a practicing attorney for 16 years, 14 of which with a firm in Carlisle. And I find that much of legal practice is navigating bureaucracy. And I know from my time as volunteer counsel to the Downtown Carlisle Association that bureaucracy can be difficult to navigate. There are grant programs, there's this requirement, there's that requirement, and I know that municipal government has a similar burden of navigating through bureaucracy to get resources for the town to obtain grants and determine, well, what is our jurisdiction here? What is our authority here? And so I bring that experience were I to be appointed.
Thank you. Mr. Shiles,
Oh,
what prior experience do you have? I've read the question to everybody else. I'll read it again. What prior experience can you bring to Borough Council that will benefit the Carlisle community?
So I've always ridden a bicycle as a mode of transportation. In 2022, I resolved to only use a car as a method of last resort. This meant almost exclusively walking, biking, or taking the bus for trips to the grocery store, hardware store, pharmacy, pediatrician, dentist, doctor, tool library, compost site, visiting friends and family, and teaching classes at HAC. As a household, we only use a car for trips to visit distant relatives and to travel places far too dangerous to go by bicycle, which have no viable public transportation. Through this, I have gained a more intimate understanding of what it means to live in Carlisle without access to a car. While most of my interactions traveling were quite positive, there have been numerous situations that have not been so. I feel fairly confident in identifying areas in need of infrastructure improvement, as well as transit, and both in and around Carlisle. In 2023, I joined with other cyclists and pedestrians in the community to form Bike Lisle, which we haven't incorporated yet. It's our intention to form a 501c3. We've worked to promote safe cycling as a mode of sustainable transportation through group rides, data analysis, the construction of custom cargo bicycles, lobbying state officials, and the creation of cultural artifacts. The physical objects of our labor will be going on display at Carlisle Arts and Learning Center this January 2025 in a show titled The Joy of Sharing the Road, if anybody wants to attend. I don't have the opening date, sorry. Additionally, I've served on the Carlisle Climate Action Commission and ensuing committee in various capacities since its inception. This has involved working with others to write grants, build surveys, analyze data, table at events, distribute LED light bulbs, hold focus groups, communicate concepts the public might find obscure, and propose solutions through memos. That's all in it. I just sort of
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Carrier, back to you for the final question of this round. What objectives and projects do you envision Carlisle pursuing in the next 5 years?
So what I wrote here was major issues facing Carlisle traffic due to the surrounding growth, no active snow emergency plan, aging infrastructure in relation to climate change, and housing shortages for certain groups of peoples, which is low to moderate income. So some of the ideas that I've seen or that I would like to see, and this would not cost a lot of money, is, for instance, on my block, everyone has taken out the grass strip on the sidewalk. This would be from your sidewalk, then there'd be a grass strip, and then there would be the curb, and then the street. So I'm a walker, and I do a lot of walking. I walk at least 5 miles a day. And one day it was raining, and all the water from everyone's roof were just coming down over the sidewalk into the street. And as a result, the handicap ramps that were put in are actually worthless because water doesn't go uphill, and so they flood. And so you'll end up having to walk into the street in order to cross the street because you can't walk through a puddle of water. These are some of the big issues I see are traffic. People are speeding, they're blowing through stop signs. I'd like to see more stop signs, maybe speed bumps, more speed bumps. I know there's a couple that just went in. And then the whole area is growing, and there's no coordination. What's going to happen is that the traffic is going to get worse in Carlisle because people are going to come in. They're going to go to the Walmart. They're going to go. They want to go to Giant, or they have to go to the courthouse. Um, and for us that live in town and walk, it creates a dangerous situation. I know it's a state law that you're supposed to stop for somebody in the crosswalk. Well, people don't do it. And so, just an example, right at Graham in college, because I have to walk across the street. I stand there while cars go. I should not have to walk 2 blocks out of my way. And I'm just not talking about myself. I'm talking about school children and everyone else. So these are, I think, are some of the big issues that that have come up and will be coming up in the next 5 years.
Thank you. Mr. Evans, what objectives and projects do you envision Carlisle pursuing in the next 5 years?
What I envision is, again, as I stated before, more citizen feedback, walking the streets and talking to citizens, businesses, and getting that feedback to see where the residents of Carlisle would like that vision to go, and have an honest feedback to shape that trajectory for the short, mid, and long term. I know we're looking at 5 years, but we can still break down that 5 years even into short, mid, and long term. Um, what I think that engagement will get feedback, and there's always feedback flowing in, and taking that and developing plans um, to look at the main priorities. What I look at is sound fiscal, not only looking at getting over the hump, but trying to predict out what it's going to be like, whether that's at the county, state, or federal level where funds come in. I also believe that we need a reduction in the poverty rate. Um, I ran last year, and the 2017 to 2021 poverty rate for Carlisle was 15.5%. That's from census.gov. And Pennsylvania was 12.1%. The federal government at census.gov put out their recent 2023 numbers. Pennsylvania dropped a tenth of a percent down to 12%, but Carlisle increased to 18.9%. We got to focus on attracting business and investment in this community. There is an investment, but I don't think enough at this time that will help lift people out of poverty and give opportunities and also increase the tax base. There's a lot of development on the West Shore, but I think we lose out on a lot of things here. It doesn't mean that we have to have ginormous warehouses, but we can find a balance to have the historic heart of Carlisle and the historic feel and the small town feel. But we're growing as a community rapidly, from the 2022 census, or the 2020 census, to the 2022 census. We grew 10.4%. So we grew about 2,000, roughly 2,000 people. If that holds, we could be 30,000 at the next census. I think those numbers will probably level off. But we need to attract that investment into the community, which leads me to, there's a lot of outdated housing or lack of housing here, whether that's affordable housing or other housing for folks. And what we need to do is update that inventory. We need to attract that investment, not cookie cutter projects that fall apart, but sound projects that come in that don't rake the citizens over the coals, charge them just for shoddy work. We need that quality housing because that's going to attract other people that want to stay here. We have the U.S. Army War College. A lot of people retire out of there. We have Dickinson School of Law, Penn State, Dickinson. We also have Dickinson. So we don't want to lose brain drain. We got a lot of people that want to operate here. So if we can attract businesses, that attracts small businesses here to be able to grow the community. And then hopefully we can keep some of that knowledge here to continue to make the community better. And again, the poverty rate, we got to solve the homelessness. I think some of the other things we need to do, but some of the projects, I was here, there's a planning commission. I'm not sure what happened, but somebody was trying down near the old Giant to develop a homeless shelter. We need to, within the law, and not to give favoritism, but we need to be able to fast track some projects like homeless shelters, as long as it's within the rules, and set those standards so that it doesn't become a belabored process. If that means we have to have other meetings that are out of the norm to get it through to help get people the help they need. That's what we need to do. We need to be proactive and be able to engage the community and not, well, this is how it's always been done. We need to think outside the box. We need to be able to look at problems. And again, that's why I always say the frankness. We need to be frank. None of us are perfect. We come together as a team, and as I alluded to, we got to problem solve, and we can't just say it's the state. We got to kick on the door. We got to be the squeaky wheel that they want to grease, which means we get the funding, or we get the assistance, or we get the regulations knocked down. And then, and those priorities are going to change as everything changes, whether we grow in population or other dynamics, global dynamics or national dynamics. So we need to adjust and be able to adjust on the fly as those things change. But as we're doing now, the infrastructure, we need to build the sound infrastructure, and that's not only the roundabouts that we do to have the flow of traffic. And I know people, they've been talking for years for 81, which is a vital artery that brings a lot of commerce and things into Carlisle. And I know people through the Hats and other areas have been fighting for that. But we need to really knock on that door and kick that door open, because they've been talking for decades, and you continue to do studies. There continues to be accidents. There's too much traffic, and it should have been developed a long time ago and expanded and thoughtful things to be able to project for exponential growth instead of just narrow things. But I know I'm probably rambling on here, but
And you just ran out of time too.
just ran out of time. But thank you.
You get to be the first one who used up all 5 minutes. So. Okay. Ms. James, what objectives and projects do you envision Carlisle pursuing in the next 5 years?
So to no one's surprise, I'm going to give you some categories and numbers. I would say there's 3 kind of key vision priorities that Carlisle can pursue in the next 5 years and so on: public works, land use reform, and then environmental sustainability. I'll elaborate on each one briefly. In terms of public works, I think it's been clear from everyone's statements thus far that infrastructure is a big thing Carlisle needs to consider as we continue to grow and develop. We have some aging infrastructure, but we also have some really good programs already in place that I think we can continue and make sure that we're fostering, such as our sidewalk inspection program, for example, to make sure that these critical infrastructures such as lighting, sidewalks, water treatment facilities, things people don't really think about, but keep the place moving and the lights on, ensuring that those day-to-day operations are taken care of. That's always got to be a top priority. And then coupled with this, Carlisle, of course, has a vision priority of encouraging an artisan industry and district. And talk about encouraging small business and development, especially in the downtown Carlisle area. This is a unique opportunity we have to really foster economic development and creativity within Carlisle, which really is such a unique place in that you have all the access to amenities such as Target, Walmart, etc. But then you really do get that downtown feel. And then coupled with this, of course, is the need to talk about making sure that Carlisle is pedestrian friendly and walkable. And there's a growing push for bike infrastructure. So really considering what that would look like in the long term, of course, being cognizant of the current laws and ramifications we have in place. And how does that look, ensuring the safety of not only the biker, but the motorist, and the current restrictions we do have in place, but being forward thinking in a long-term goal to encourage kind of environmentalism and a pedestrian safe area for Carlisle. And then land use reform. This is kind of the more weedsy nerd part of me coming out, but really, I think a lot of the issues we face as a community can be fixed with reform and land use reform specifically. Talk about like worrying about housing and infrastructure. A lot of that can be addressed with flexible zoning ordinances and housing ordinances to really address the rampant single house use and living that we have in Carlisle. For example, I mentioned briefly accessory dwelling units is a really great way to address not only the aged population in Carlisle, but also opens up a lot more flexible and affordable housing for people in our community. And that's just one example of how land use reform and ordinances can work in our favor as a community. And then I think this goes in tandem with the idea of being aware that bureaucracy is a slow moving creature, and that all of these visions and priorities that we have, of course, are going to have to work through the minutia of bureaucracy. So being cognizant of that and communicating that not to the borough council, but to the Carlisle community about the process and how that works, and seeing what they expect out of reform and our development. And then third, environmental sustainability outside of just the benefits that come from walkability, bike infrastructure, etc. I believe Carlisle is one in 20 municipalities in all of the Commonwealth that actually has a current climate action plan, which is great news for us. And so the priority in encouraging actual environmental sustainability is keeping true to our word and actually making sure that we are taking the proactive steps that we have already detailed and looked into, from lowering carbon emissions to encouraging use of solar panels and all of the other vision priorities we have detailed in our current pre-existing climate action plan, to ensure that not only is Carlisle a safe and developing place we want to live in, but that it's a clean place for people in the future. And I think really if we keep these things in mind and ensure to capitalize on our opportunities and forward think, Carlisle really has amazing potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kozlerich, what objectives and projects do you envision Carlisle pursuing in the next 5 years?
Three different areas. I've already spoken of the need to meet the needs of unhoused individuals, and to do so in a way that is both compassionate and sustainable. Second area, I would like to see the borough continue to work with the Downtown Carlisle Association to make sure that this is a wonderful place to start and build a business. Events like Ice Fest and the Amani Festival, those are huge for the community. They're huge for the business community. To get people downtown walking around, not just going, I'm going to this business today, walking around seeing, oh, there's all these other incredible businesses in downtown Carlisle. Who knew? I wouldn't have known but for this event. So I'd like to see that relationship continue. And the final specific area is better management of car show traffic. The car shows are a part of this community. It's an economic engine. But for those of us who live on the north end, more near the fairgrounds, the traffic can be rather unmanageable some weekends of the year. And that I knew that when I moved to the area. But it's something that I certainly hear the community grumbling about. Maybe a little less since the pandemic. Traffic has been down a little bit, but I'd like to see more of a central management plan to deal with the problems that can bring.
Thank you. Mr. Shiles, what objectives and projects do you envision Carlisle pursuing in the next 5 years?
Sure. So I kind of have a list, and I guess one thing I would like to mention is that a lot of the grants from the Inflation Reduction Act are sort of closing. For the EPA, the last grant available is November 21st of this year. There's also a few more in the that are available through the Department of Energy that are, I think, available through 2026, pending on who wins the next election for president. So applying for one of those grants or multiple of grants would be something I think the borough should do. Continue its work on its Vision Zero goals, ensuring the implementation of the Safe Streets for All program, prioritizing areas with high injury rates, work to improve cycling and walking connections to essential services in and around Carlisle by increasing trail connections on the periphery and in the heart of Carlisle, improving transit service and connections in Carlisle Borough. I know this is sort of dependent on PennDOT, but trying to halt commercial truck traffic on High and Hanover streets. To me, it's really only a matter of time before a cyclist or a pedestrian does an underride on one of those tractor trailers, and that would be pretty horrific. Work with educational institutions to develop policies that discourage students and faculty from driving and bringing private vehicles into Carlisle. Ensure the borough follows through on its community choice aggregation as a means to affordably reduce emissions from electricity generation. Continue to make needed and sustainable investment in its water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure. Continue with the land use reform to reduce car dependency and increase revenue and reduce the environmental impacts of parking and sprawl. Further reduce solid waste. Further improve solid waste reduction and diversion with a focus on single-use plastics, food waste, compostables, and e-waste. Plan for and pilot a district heating system in Carlisle, ideally with funding from an outside agency such as the Department of Energy. create pre-approved construction plans for affordable zero energy buildings. Those are buildings that would use less energy than they produce. Update building codes for greater efficiency, increase borough tree canopy and green spaces with a focus on heat islands, decarbonize borough operations, make it easier for property owners to install rooftop solar, increase the uptake of EV charging stations, solar arrays, and heat pumps throughout the borough. Develop assistance programs to assist property owners in accurately measuring building performance standards and updating their properties. Improve the energy efficiency in rental properties by setting minimum building performance standards in the borough rental code for attic insulation R value, number of glazing panes, air change rates, and annual fuel usage efficiency for combustion-based heating. Expanding parking enforcement and pay for parking areas, requiring point-of-sale energy audits, to seek out additional sources of revenue. These are sort of just general ideas, but making sources of revenue more progressive, setting up a formalized arts commission, and reviewing borough ordinances for obsolescence, effectiveness, and relevance. The old ordinances, sorry, and develop a green fund for sustainable capital projects. And that's just sort of, there are other things I have in mind, but that was just sort of what I listed down, so I know that's a lot, but yeah, if you have any questions, I guess we'll have time for that. So,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Charles. That was quite a list. Next, we will move into questions that obviously you were prepared for these questions. We move into the fun part where you get questions from wherever they may come from council members. And as we do that, again, you'll have 3 minutes to answer each. Unless a question is limited to a clarification of a particular applicant's background or qualifications, you'll each have an opportunity to answer the questions. I was going to start to my left with Council Roos, but I'm terrible at remembering when we have a council member by Zoom. So I'm going to start with Councilor Perry while I'm thinking about it. Councilor Perry, do you have any questions for the applicants?
I do not. I'm thinking, but I do not at this time.
Okay. Well, I can circle back to you. Just shout out if I finish with I usually finish with myself. So if I get to me and you have questions, just remind me. Councilor Roos, do you have any questions of the applicants?
I do actually. Sorry, I told you I didn't, but I changed my mind. Why Borough Council now? Some of you have been longtime residents. Some of you are new-ish to Carlisle. There was a vacancy about a year-ish ago. So why are you feeling so compelled to try to garner this opportunity right now?
And we'll begin with Mr. Evans.
The reason that I'm so compelled to run is because, as I've stated, here at this meeting, I want to represent people. I want to fight for people, the people that don't have a voice. And even the people, I want to fight for everyone, but there's a lot of people that don't feel they have a voice. I ran the last election last year, and I garnered, on a campaign that I ran myself, 1,776 votes, unique number too, that I gained, not counting some of the votes that had the wrong name. But I want to be able to represent people, and I've served this country for 34 plus years. And too often I see people taken advantage of, people's voice are not heard. And I want to be the person that, as I often state, you see me at council raising issues. I want to be the person that ruffles feathers and pushes us again towards that beacon to make Carlisle a better community, get people back involved in their government. Because I'm a hardcore believer in what our founders intended. I don't believe in a lifetime service in government. And I've answered that in the question. I believe whether I serve 1 year or I run for an election, our founders intended for us not to be lifetime in the government. Our founders intended us to come in, do a job, and come back into the populace. So I want to represent those people that don't have a voice and encourage those people to get out and start being more proactive in their local government, to fight for what they believe and not just post things. You can get things off of Facebook, but you get better nonverbals and frank reaction by talking to people. So I'm going to continue to fight. I took an oath to serve this country and put my life on it, and I'll continue to do that, not only at the national level, but at the state level and at the local level, and fight for people to make everybody's lives better. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. James, same question.
So my answer to why Borough Council is the same, which is it's born out of my desire to serve my community. As for why now, I specifically really moved to Carlisle and wanted to get involved in the community first before I decided I could lead said community. So I spent the first few years of my life here getting involved in organizations, getting to know people. And now I'm at the unique opportunity where I kind of have more flexibility and free time now that my educational journey is done. That affords me the opportunity to do something such as Borough Council and really dedicate my time and energy to it in a way I honestly just could not before.
Thank you. Mr. Kozlovich.
I regretted not applying for the previous vacancy because this community has been so good to me. And by that point, I had, as I had spoken before, I had already taken notice of the council's quality of life initiatives, such as the Human Rights Commission and things of that nature. I didn't want to regret not applying this time.
Thank you. Mr. Shiles.
Ethel, did you have a chance to respond? Or?
So we're going in a slightly different order, so
sorry.
different people have the first opportunity to answer. Yeah.
I guess so I kind of highlighted the sort of urgency of climate change being sort of the reason why I'm applying. Councillor Hicks, who just left the sort of caused the vacancy, was focused on climate change and was running the climate action committee, and so we have the planet really has 5 years left to half its emissions to stay on target, and I don't see the United States, Pennsylvania, or Carlisle anywhere near that. So I suspect that we're going to blow past 1.5 degrees Celsius and rather quickly. And so to me, there's an urgency there. There's also an urgency with sort of what's left from the Inflation Reduction Act. So those are the sort of reasons why I'd like to be on Borough Council.
Thank you. Ms. Carey.
Well, I ran twice in the 1980s, back when there was not one single woman up there, okay? And they were all Republicans except for one, and that was Bill Duncan. So I did apply for the last position that came open 2 years ago, and I was not selected. From there, a lot of things have happened in why I didn't run for Borough Council in the last election. Well, a lot of things have happened in my life. My husband passed away unexpectedly, and I owned at one time 5 rental properties in town. I'm down to 2, and I had to go through the borough inspection plan, and that took up a lot of my time because now my husband, who used to do a lot of the work, was not available, so I had to hire people to complete all what was necessary to pass the inspections. And I do resent people talking about slum landlords because many of us are not.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Roos, do you have any other questions?
That's all. Thank you so much.
Okay, Councilor Mellon.
Sure. So my question is, what do you think is the primary responsibility of a borough council member?
We'll begin with Ms. James.
I think the primary responsibility as a borough councilor is to listen to your constituents. I think I've kind of had a theme throughout my interview today, which is to really serve a community, you have to understand them and be a part of them. As a borough councilor, I think your first responsibility should be to listen, practice empathy, understanding, and then to communicate that and take reasonable action steps where possible and where necessary to meet those needs and desires of your community members.
Thank you. Mr. Kozlovich.
I would say that the primary responsibility of a borough council member is stewardship of the taxpayers' dollar. I am not anti-government by any measure, but ultimately, when you are in a position of public trust, that is primarily a financial obligation to the people who elected or appointed you and who are paying the taxes to fund the services that we all rely on and that are all essential to daily life. But ultimately, we need to be a steward of that trust and of the financial trust placed in us.
Thank you. Mr. Shiles.
I would just simply say to advocate for what's best for the community, and then to communicate that to its constituents, and also listen to constituents. I think sort of, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Carrier.
I also believe that we need to listen to the community. I remember when Grace United Methodist Church was moving to the new location, and the members of the community came out and were expressing their concerns in regards to the change of the parking requirements, and yet Borough Council ignored their concerns. But luckily, instead of a restaurant and apartments going in, it's a school today.
Thank you. Mr. Evans.
What I believe is the primary responsibility of a council person is your oath to the Constitution, United States Constitution, the Pennsylvania State Constitution, and the Borough Charter, what's written in the Charter, and that can be changed, as we know, and representing the citizens based on that information. We all take an oath of office to uphold that and to be honest and to engage and represent Carlisle and citizen feedback even when we don't agree. And if we don't agree with that feedback, we need to present things to those individuals, an explanation why it's not the best course of action or the best way to go. And again, you close that loop and you represent the people that live in this community. And again, hold up your oath to that office and all the applicable documents, constitutions, and charters associated with that.
Thank you, Mr. James. Any other questions? Okay. Mr. Stevie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like you to each discuss a time when you've faced conflict or disagreement with someone else, how you handled that situation, and how it ultimately turned out.
We'll begin with Mr. Kalsrich.
As an attorney, I deal with conflict every day. That is the primary role, is not to have a lot of bluster or get loud or aggressive on behalf of your client. Your job is to resolve conflict in a way that parties can live with. So this is something I've dealt with professionally for the last 16 years.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shiles.
Sure. So I would say probably an example would, I've run into a lot of situations where I've been advocating for bike lanes and sort of safer streets. And there's a lot of people, especially around Carlisle, that see us as kind of like we're a means for them to get where they're going, and they don't see Carlisle as an end in itself. And I guess so. Often people are sort of advocating for putting 2 lanes back on High and Hanover Street, or widening lanes in Carlisle. And I find that just talking to them, listening to them, but also presenting them with the evidence that we have is really important, and just sort of helping people think through what they're asking for, and what that means for other road users, what that means for other people who might not be like them, whether that's children or elderly, or people who don't own a car. So yeah, that's kind of succinct enough.
Thank you. Ms. Carrier.
I really haven't been in that position. My whole career has been working with people and coming up with a solution. So I guess through collaboration and listening to others is how I solve the problems.
Thank you. Mr. Evans.
Um, I guess I have a couple of different ways I can present this. Is whether you're being shot at or bombs dropped on you in a war zone is a different way that you deal with conflict and disagreement with an enemy. But that's not what this is all about. But that helped shapes conflict. That helped shape conflict resolution with me over a period of time. I could give numerous examples of disagreeing on how to conduct operations on things that I can't really go into, but where you're fighting for a priority or to do something or not to do something. And what I've learned through those things is I used to be a hothead, and over that period of time, and that's why I think life experiences is extremely important. As everyone has different uh, things that they're exposed to, but you need to take pause. Um, and you need to sit down, and I'm a deep thinker. Sometimes things will fire me up. You take emotion out of it, you step back, um, and you think about it, and you come forward. And if you're wrong, you're the bigger person, and it's hard for a lot of people. You admit you're wrong, and you work through those differences and how you move forward to get to the point where everybody's trying to work. Too often we put too much emotion in, um, and that's use our vision. That's where we need to take pause and step back, take that out, and be able to sit down and work with people. And when we're wrong, admit we're wrong, and move on and not hold grudges, and work towards the goals that we're working to achieve.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Ms. James.
Well, first off, I also practice the law and I'm a middle child, so I'm well acquainted with conflict. I am going to give you a specific example and a solution, kind of walking you through that process because I believe that is helpful. Prior to my time in Carlisle, I actually practiced journalism, and I practiced journalism in the height of COVID-19. And as you can imagine, there were a lot of conflicts, especially with institutions and reporting COVID data numbers. And so there was a conflict in which we were trying to get that information. And the way we resolved it was through kind of like the traditional caucusing method, in which you kind of sit down with a person and you figure out, one, what is your common vision and shared values, which I think is at the heart of good governance, is approaching a situation with empathy and understanding for the other side if there is a disagreement. And then from there, you're really able to dive into creative problem solving and finding out solutions that you really wouldn't have otherwise thought about if you were in my camp, their camp. So that's really the first step. And then, as echoed, you take emotion out of it and you think about it strategically from a shared vision priority. And from there, you're really able to operate to understand what the larger goal of a community or an organization is. And I think that really affords you a lot of opportunities and collaboration that otherwise would just be closed off because of human nature. And in terms of solutions there, after we kind of had that caucusing, what we came to was a agreement and a compromise where we were able to access that data, but in a raw number format as opposed to percentages, because turns out that their worry was people getting confused about the data, whereas our concern was the lack of data, which again is things you figure out and you discover when you communicate and you actually sit down with somebody and try to figure out where are you coming from on this issue and what is your shared vision here. And we both clearly want to serve the community, and so how can we best do that together?
Thank you. Mr. Stubbe, do you have any other questions?
I do, and I guess to kind of qualify before I ask this, I just want to, one, thank you all for your interest in serving the borough, and emphasize to you that obviously only one of you will be selected, and there are a variety of boards and commissions that we have here in the borough that I'd encourage you to look into and volunteer if you are selected for this position. That said, the question I have, and I'll say that it's okay if you don't know at this point, but if you are appointed to this vacant borough council seat, the seat itself would be up for election next year. In that instance, would you plan to run for the vacant seat when it's up for election next year?
I feel, Mr. Childs, you get to answer that one first. That's a yes or a no question, but
Yes, yes, I would.
okay, thank you. Ms. Gary,
Yes.
Mr. Evans,
Most likely, depending on the constituents, again, about what our founders intended is limited. You serve one term, and if constituents and they like my job, then yes, I would run. If they don't like my job, then I'll get that feedback and make an appropriate decision.
Ms. James,
Yes.
and Mr. Kozlovich.
Undecided.
Do you have any? It sounded like that was the final one. Okay. Does Deputy Mayor have any questions?
So a lot of this has all been about, you know, what Carlisle needs, and of course, there's lots of things that Carlisle needs. But I really also just like to know, like, what your passion is, and I want you to tell me your favorite thing about Carlisle. It could be anything. I just want to know.
So, Ms. Carrier first.
Well, I live in town. I live near the YMCA. So the thing that I like about Carlisle is that I can walk everywhere, and I can even walk to the Giant. But depending on the amount of groceries I have, I usually drive. But yeah, and I live in town, and we're on 30-foot lots, and I know my neighbors, and that's the other thing that I like about Carlisle.
Mr. Evans.
My favorite thing about Carlisle is the people. That's what makes this town, is the people and the uniqueness, and engaging those people. That's what I get out of every day, walking around and talking to people, getting views, whether they agree, disagree with me, or we find a happy medium, but understanding what they've been through in life. That's what I enjoy about this town. And then also, you know, the unique people that come here from the international fellows and other people that come here for business or the car shows, just talking to those people. That's what I love about this town.
Ms. James.
So my genuine answer is that my favorite part of Carlisle is the community spirit and the resources we have here to support the community. There are so many organizations and people that are really just willing to lend a hand at any time and really are here truly to support their fellow man and woman. A silly answer is that I love trivia, and I feel like if you go anywhere in Carlisle, there's going to be trivia. So that's just a bonus.
Mr. Kozlovich.
The people of this community I found are just so friendly, so compassionate, very open-minded, often opinionated, but in a way that is receptive to new information or receptive to people who might disagree. And so we can disagree without being enemies. We can disagree and still be friends.
Thank you. Mr. Childs.
I like that. I mean, kind of this might sound redundant, but you know, the fact that I can walk, bike around Carlisle very easily. I mean, the you know, furthest place is like probably 1.5 miles from my house within the borough, and the fact that I can do that while running into people I know is really kind of awesome. It's really I almost never experienced that when I lived in Boston, and it's you know, I've lived in a bunch of other college towns, but you know, Carlisle doesn't. It has colleges, but it's not just a college town. It's much more than that, and there's a much stronger community here, and I like that there are people that are invested in caring for this community and care about its future. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Councilor Perry, I'll give you another crack at it if you have any questions.
I do, and then I had one, and then Jeff stole it, but that's okay. No, my question is, well, I'm going to start off by saying that Carlisle is getting more diverse every year, all the time. We're starting to see more people of color that are here. So my question is, how well do you work with diverse groups of people? here in Carlisle?
And we'll begin with Mr. Evans.
I work very well with diverse groups. As I've stated, I've been around the world. I've been here in Carlisle. Um, what matters is the human person on the other side that you're talking to, and that's what you focus on. And you be genuine, and you look them in the eye, and you have an honest and frank conversation with them. But the experience I have of working with people from all religious, ethnic, racial, whatever backgrounds, my travel around the globe has helped me to, you know, have views that I never used to have, maybe when I was younger. So it allows me to give a better understanding on working with diverse groups, and presenting things that they may not like to hear, but at the end, when I present it, they it opens their minds the same way when they present things to me. It opens my mind. It gives me a different view, and I can empathize. I can agree. And as I often tell people, sometimes initially you may not agree with something. You always plant a seed. And when you work with different groups, they may plant a seed. I may not agree with it, but then you sit back and you think about it, and you're like, now I understand. Does that mean that either side will fully support each other? No, but you grow, and that's the great thing about talking to people and that human aspect, of getting to know people as an individual.
Thank you. Ms. James.
So I truly believe that democracy works best when not everyone looks or thinks the same way as you, which means diversity is extremely important. I've had the opportunity to work with a few coalitions and organizations here in Carlisle that are filled with diverse people and thoughts, from the Carlisle Pride Committee, the Carlisle Area Democratic Committee, and I also actually am certified in landlord tenant mediation, where I've gotten a chance to work with a lot of people here in Carlisle, and really get to know a diverse range of people. And I think as borough councilor, our goal should be to amplify um, all voices, but especially those that have been historically um, underrepresented and not heard on this council. So being cognizant of that and really being plugged into those communities is a key element of serving in this capacity.
Mr. Kozlovich.
A portion of my legal practice, I'm a criminal justice act panel attorney for the Middle District of Pennsylvania, which is similar to that of a public defender. So oftentimes I will get appointed clients that I don't have a thing in the world in common with. Sometimes we don't even speak the same language. They're from very different economic circumstances, social circumstances, and you have to find a way to earn their trust, figure out what their interests are, what their goals are, and find ways to achieve those goals, even though they and I may be very different.
Thank you. Mr. Shiles.
Thanks. I guess I think it's great that Carlisle is becoming more diverse, and I hope that it continues to become more diverse. We need that here. What I would say is that in terms of working with people from diverse backgrounds, I think I come from a very privileged background, and I think I need to remind myself of that constantly. Not everybody has that privilege, and I think that it's important. One of the ways I remind myself of that is by riding a bicycle. It teaches you what it's like to be in a marginalized space. I think, fortunately for me, that ends as soon as I get off my bike and walk into my house, and other people do not get that privilege. So that's something I feel like I have to kind of constantly think about. That not everybody gets to live the same way that I do.
Thank you. Ms. Carrier.
My last name is Carrier, just to correct you.
I'm sorry, say it again.
My last name is Carrier.
Carrier.
Yes.
That's what I've been saying.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It didn't sound like it. Maybe it's
Yeah.
the sound system.
Okay, sure.
All right. I grew up in an integrated neighborhood. My best friend growing up is Native American. We still stay in touch, even though we live in different cities. One of my good friends is from Afghanistan. I said I'm in my 17th year of working at the U.S. Army War College. This year I have Ecuador. Last year I had Nepal. I've had Jordan, Gabon, Mali. I've had Asian countries, South American countries. So, and I also work with the international spouses that we do activities with. Again, all different religions, all different colors, all different backgrounds. My neighborhood is very diverse as well. And so I have a good background working with a diverse group of individuals.
Thank you. And Council Perry, was that your only question? Do you have other questions?
Nope, that's everything. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. I usually defer, sort of thinking that other council members will steal my questions, but Council Perry got close. And I was going to handle it. I'm going to have two questions, and I was going to lead with a different question, but since that last question kind of segues into this, you may be familiar that Carlisle had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to take a look at that report that is on our website. Their recommendations, I'm not going to test you on the recommendations, but what I would like to know is what your vision is for the borough moving forward to tackle the issue of racial equity. And a number of you had touched on issues that have disparate impacts on our communities of color. You may have thought about those issues as you were commenting on different areas, but nobody really touched on the racial equity issue that we have here in the borough. And we will begin with Ms. James.
So I have read the Truth and Reconciliation report, and I think that the way we go about implementing some of the vision items in the report, and just generally being cognizant of the systemic impacts of race on our society and therefore on Carlisle, first and foremost is by communicating with the key stakeholders and or coalitions that were one part of the committee, but also that really are the bedrock of Carlisle. To have a wider understanding of the continuing developing needs that come from the community of color here. And then secondly, I think we can circumvent and kind of start to address some of the long systemic issues that come with racial separation by taking action as Borough Council, whether that be through variances and taking zoning action, or whether that be when we're cognizant in our public works and infrastructure steps, because they do have a disparate impact on people of color. And so being aware of those things as we move forward as a council. And quite frankly, I don't think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is a one-off thing. This is clearly a continuing and developing conversation. And I think clearly, like that was acknowledged in the report itself, that this is always going to be a conversation, and it shouldn't just be a conversation when it's politically expedient or a hot button topic, but it's something that we're cognizant of in our day-to-day governing and in our communications with the community. And I think that's just the first step in terms of many steps of keeping this in mind as we do our governance.
Thank you. Mr. Kozlovich.
I've already spoken somewhat on the questions of economic and criminal justice issues, which are often intertwined with racial equity. I think in all aspects, it is important that we all many of us come from a degree of privilege. It is important to keep that in check and keep that in mind when making decisions that affect other people. Oftentimes in law, we see a law that on its face is racially neutral, but has a racially disparate impact. And that is something that even people acting in good faith in positions of trust, such as a city council, will often enact, not even realizing that this has a disparate racial impact. And that's something that must be considered, because we are a diverse community. The United States is growing more diverse, and Carlisle is growing more diverse.
Thank you. Mr. Shiles.
I think investing in our communities, particularly communities of color, is really kind of extreme importance, and that those communities are helping guide those decisions. Also understanding sort of, I think a big problem in Carlisle is the sort of, we have a lot of people who rent, and that we need to be able to advocate for people who cannot afford to buy a home, and sort of make sure that they are being treated fairly. I guess just sort of making sure that we see investment in our community where, especially where we've seen um, some of the historical impacts of policing in this town. I think is really kind of where where we need to think about spending money. Yeah.
Thank you. Ms. Carrier. It might be, I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so sometimes that accent comes out a little bit. So,
Well, I guess you kind of drop your words at the end, so that's what it
I don't
sounds
say
like.
water
Carrie,
anymore. I say water. But
okay. I did not read that report, but I do know that the key to, first of all, I did not grow up in privilege. We had a poor family, and my dad died when I was 14, and I was a freshman in high school. And my mother had 3 children, and we didn't own a car, and so it was rough. Okay, but education is what is the key to prosperity. And one thing about Carlisle is we only have a few elementary schools. We feed into 2 middle schools, and we have 1 high school. And it's not like another community where they could have 5 or 6 high schools or something like that. And your neighborhood determines where you go to school. Here, we all feed into the same high school. And that, I think, is very important, education.
thank you. Mr. Evans.
The best way, and I've read, and I'm not fully versed, but I have read the report. It's been a little bit, but the best way is engagement with individuals. We don't want to. Everybody is different. Everybody's individual. We don't want to put people into groups, and we don't want to assume in a group because somebody that may be in one group that we assume may not have the ideas that we assume they do. You have to talk to each individual. We are a diverse community, regardless of color, um, religion, etc. But talking to each of those individuals and having that better understanding and solving that problem is the way that, or you get that information to solve a problem. We don't just want to assume, okay, you're put in a box, you're put in a box, you're put in a box because we write a report. The report helps us guide us in a way, but it's still that engagement with the individuals and getting feedback from each individual. And how do you solve it is those frank discussions, even discussions that are uncomfortable depending on the subject that may come up. And as I will agree, education and critical thinking is a big way of solving problems for people to challenge and be more involved with their government. And that's why I'm like, citizens need to be involved and we need to engage the community so they get involved to ask those critical questions so that we can see where they're coming from. But again, the way that you solve those things of equity and what affects people is walking the streets and talking to each individual and getting feedback and putting that information together to get a better picture. And it's not a one-time off, okay, we're done. It's constant engagement, it's constant feedback, and understanding the historical aspects, because we can look at what's in the book, but that may not be applicable to that individual that's here in the community. So we need to get those little nuanced things to get a better understanding. It's great we have commissions, but it doesn't cover everything. But walking the street, you'll get a lot more honest feedback than surveys and how to approach things or what people feel historically or how they feel slighted or how they feel challenged or roadblocks to them being successful. And then you get that information and you go back and you get feedback, constant improvement process, get feedback, how do you improve, and then get feedback from those individuals in the community, different folks, and move forward. That's how I see to tackle those things, issues.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Okay, the final question is, and we'll begin with you, Mr. Kozarich. What do you see as having been 2 of council's top priorities over the past 4 years, and what active role have you taken on those issues in the community?
Well, I've spoken already of the Human Relations Commission and the Non-Discrimination Ordinance, and I, for one, am proud to live in a community of this size that has those legal protections. That's not something that you see very often in communities of our size. I am proud to live in a community with a 100 equity score from the Human Relations Commission. I'm sorry, the Human Rights Council. It's similar to the name of our commission. And that's something that piques my interest in terms of getting involved with local government.
Mr. Shiles.
Sure. So I think what the borough has kind of currently been doing with safety improvements regarding traffic around the borough, I think has been really important and sort of noted. And I would also say the land use reform that the borough has been going through has been incredibly important. I think whenever I come to borough council and there's something presented, it always seems like there's some aspect that's taken the climate into consideration, taken our use of resources into consideration, whether or not it's sustainable or not. So those two things.
Thank you. Ms. Carey.
Okay, so one of the things that was the landlord rental inspection program, and I was very involved in being on the one that had to go through this painful process and it was painful because you had to go through and have, first of all, I called the codes office and many times they could not answer my questions. So I would have to do my own research. Like I couldn't even get a copy of the fire code. But my properties did pass. And the other thing was your address in regards to climate change. Now, the things that I've done myself is I have put solar panels on my home. I have rain barrels. I have taken out concrete out of my yard. I've planted native plants. And so, and I have a rain barrel at my rental properties. I have compost bins at my rental properties, including my own.
Thank you. Mr. Evans.
Can you just restate it was a two-part question?
Sure. Yeah. And you have been sitting there for a while, so I'll reread it. What do you see as having been two of council's top priorities over the past 4 years, and what active role have you taken on those issues in the community?
Two of them are the infrastructure projects, the connectivity project. I guess you can tie it in. There's two parts to that. And what I've taken is I've attended other meetings with the connectivity, part of the connectivity project and the redevelopment of the old Maslin sites. I've been here to offer ideas on improvements going forward for those projects or things that I see that just an outside perspective of, hey, you may want to do this with the project. I know there were some things with the potential grocery store that was going to be developed over there. I know I weighed in a planning meeting, and that's where I go back and say, sometimes we need to look at things, and I made a recommendation to the planning, or was it zoning? I can't remember if it was zoning or planning, but I made a recommendation for them. There were some things about the structure and a door based on how code and it was zoned and was written up, but it meant that supermarket or that was potentially being constructed there had to come back. And I recommended to them is, hey, can you craft up something that keeps people in right and left limits, follows the law, but helps them to expedite to get that needed part of the community developed, so that it doesn't just keep being delayed because a door isn't here or a window should be here. It needs to be able to be streamlined. So I did participate in that and provide feedback. It's kind of related, but it's also recently the speed tables for the B Street connectivity project because of speeding. It started out early. We've seen a change in traffic when the sites opened up between Tire and Rubber and Maslin. So, I'd recommended a study come out to see the traffic. I did get involved with the local news to get out about speeding. So that word got out along with sending stuff to the Borough Council. So actively trying to provide information, get it out to the public, and making recommendations on how to improve those things.
Thank you. And to finish it off, Ms. James.
So, two of the Borough Council's top priorities, in my opinion, have been land use reform slash housing infrastructure, and then diversity, equity, and inclusion as Carlisle continues to grow and develop. Just briefly, my participation in housing and infrastructures, as I've said briefly, I've previously done work in zoning and comparative analysis. Now, that was on a wider PA level, but it was to make suggestions to municipalities just like Carlisle about how they can use zoning as a flexible way to address some of their aging infrastructure. And then, of course, I'm landlord tenant mediation trained, and that is kind of how I help alleviate some of the pre-existing burdens and issues that are still existing within infrastructure here in Carlisle. And then with equity, inclusion, and diversity as a priority, I'm a member of the Carlisle Pride Committee. I actually planned the event with the Small Business Eclipse Gaming Cafe, where all of the funds went to a local LGBTQ plus organization here in Central PA. I also volunteer with the YWCA and a few other stakeholder coalitions to make sure that we are amplifying those important and often marginalized voices here in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that concludes the Q&A portion of the interview process. And I'll make some comments. I'll allow council to make some comments right before we have to, unfortunately, sit in judgment and vote. And I'll also note, I know he's been creeping around here. We were trying to get a common pleas court judge here to swear in the eventual new council member, but secretly I was hoping they would not be available. Although I like every one of them, for the record. But we're fortunate enough to have Judge Daniel Friedman here, and I think he's lurking out in the hallway. But Judge Friedman is a former, a retired member of the Carlisle Police Department, and our detective sergeant. So we're happy to have him back. I'd like to just say that you all gave incredibly thoughtful answers to all these questions, and appreciate your time here this evening. I mentioned that I had won an appointment in 2005. I won that appointment over Perry Heath in a 3-2 vote. The election that I lost by 15 votes later that year was lost to Perry Heath. I ran into Perry coincidentally yesterday while I was in assessment hearings of all things, and he asked me, "Did you have the vote yet on those the new council member?" And I said, "No, it's tomorrow night, Perry." And he said, I looked at their applications. It looks like you have a really good bunch there to choose from. And I truly mean this, that I think we wouldn't go wrong selecting any one of you. So appreciate what you've done by stepping forward and stepping up for your community this evening, and as you do, throughout your lives on various issues. I started to my left. I'll start to my right. Would you like to make any comments before we vote?
Pretty much just echoing the mayor's comments that you all are excellent, and it actually is very hard. So I appreciate you answering authentically and taking the time to put in this effort. And I will also say, Mr. Evans has brought up about term limits, and my term ends next year. So when I go off, I will also probably be getting on one of these volunteer boards because I can't really just sit around. For those that do not get appointed tonight, we are very serious about giving your time for these types of commissions because they help acquaint you even more. Some of you are already doing that anyway, but because it sounds like you're very passionate about the borough, and we would love to have that energy in whatever capacity. Unfortunately, we only have one seat tonight, but there's also an election next year, so, and my seat's up.
Mr. Stubbe.
I'll just again say thank you all for applying and for your interest in serving our community. I will just say that when I had the opportunity to look at each of our applications initially, my first thought was this is going to be a difficult decision. And after hearing all of your thoughtful answers tonight, I think the decision is only more difficult. So thank you for your interest in serving our community.
Councilor Mallon.
The only thing I will add, I echo what Jeff said. It will be a challenging decision. I hope that if you're interested now, you will still be interested again when it comes time to actually put in your paperwork to run for office. And as the chair of the Employee Relations and Citizens Participation Committee, I have the responsibility for filling the vacancies on these boards and commissions, of which we have several, including the Climate Action Committee, the Planning Commission, the Zoning Hearing Board, the Pension Advisory Board, the Civil Service Commission, and I'm probably forgetting some. They're all posted on the website. So for those of you that are not chosen tonight, please take a look at that. We'd love to have every one of you serve this community. Thanks.
Councilor Roos.
I just first wanted to check in with Chief because I feel like it got a little smoky in here. Was that just me?
No, I
or
noticed that too.
You did it. Okay. I saw you do a lap, and so I was like, oh gosh, what a terrible first day for a potential future counselor if the place burns down. I know. But thank you for keeping us all safe. I just, it was a little smoky. To our applicants, thank you so much. Serving in local government is a humbling job that has rewards, but those rewards can sometimes be a long time coming, and I look forward to working with whoever gets appointed. I know that you're going to be a welcome addition to our team.
Thank you. Councilor Perry, any comments before we vote?
Yeah, I just want to say my sentiments are the same as everyone else. Thank you so much for applying. And yeah, this is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be initially. I thought I already had my mind made up, and then I didn't. So that just goes to show that all of you are great candidates. And once again, I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and before we vote, I'm going to read through the voting rules, although adjusted slightly to accommodate Councilor Perry being unable to be with us here this evening. So we all have ballots that have been handed out by the Borough Secretary. Each member of council will vote by printing their name on the name of the preferred candidate on the ballot. In addition, each Borough Council member will print and sign their own name on the ballot. Ballots lacking a printed name and signature will not be counted. I will then read each ballot aloud, and the Borough Secretary will record the votes. If any candidate receives 4 or more votes out of 6 cast, then that candidate will be deemed the winner. If the vote ends in a tie, 3-3 in the case of tonight, between 2 candidates, no action is considered taken. Borough Council may resolve the tie by reissuing ballots and following the process I just outlined. If the tie persists, Borough Council may reopen interviewing among the 2 remaining candidates and vote again. Call a recess and reconvene to vote again, or Borough Council may adjourn the meeting. If no candidate receives 4 votes, the candidate with the lowest total votes will be dropped from consideration. Following that, Borough Council will vote again on the remaining candidates by the method I already noted. If the candidates with the lowest votes are tied, having received no votes, they will be dropped from consideration. If more than one of the candidates with votes are tied for the lowest vote total, then those candidates will be voted by ballot as outlined as I just outlined. In this case, the candidate with the majority vote remains on the ballot. If a tie for the lowest vote count remains, Borough Council will vote again by ballot, with the one receiving the highest votes continuing on the ballot. Following this, Council will vote again on the remaining candidates in the method I already indicated. So it sounds convoluted. I have it in front of me, so I can follow along if we don't work this out in relatively short measure. Councilor Perry, are you prepared to text your vote to the Borough Manager?
Yes, sending right now.
Okay, thank you. And Council may vote. don't know why I'm folding my own ballot, but I did. And our names are on it anyway. But okay, to announce the votes, first, Councilor Perry votes for Rachel James. Councilor Mellon for Craig Coslerich. Councilor Roos, Rachel James. Councilor Stubbe for Robert Mitchell Shiles Jr. Deputy Mayor Landis for Robert Mitchell Shiles Jr. And I voted for Robert Mitchell Shiles Jr. So, Madam Secretary, did you record those votes?
We have 3 for Robert Shiles, 1 for Craig Coslerich, and 2 for Rachel James.
Okay. So those who did not receive any votes or removed from the ballot, I have to remind myself of these rules. I told you I'd have to look back at these. We don't have a tie. And then the members with the lowest votes have to go up. I'm sorry, we have 3 for Shiles, 2 for James, 1 for Coslerich. So Mr. Coslerich would be removed from the ballot. So we're going to move on to ballot number 2. And the candidates we would be voting for are Mr. Shiles or Ms. James. I'm locked out. Apparently, Councilor Perry's phone doesn't like to text Android phones. I have an Android phone. The borough manager has an iPhone. Okay. Councilor Perry again votes for Rachel James. Councilor Roos votes for Rachel James. Councilor Stubbe for Robert Mitchell Shiles Jr. I'm just going to say Mitch the next Councilor Mellon for Rachel James. Deputy Mayor Landis for Mitch Shiles. And I voted for Mitch Shiles. We now have a tie vote. So we will have to take a moment. So our options are to reballot, and that would require someone to change their vote. And take a recess, and you can think about it further, or we can do some further interviewing of the 2 candidates. Is there anybody on council who would like to do some further interviewing that might sway their vote? This is my nightmare situation by now. Okay. and Council Perry, I'm not ignoring you. If you want to chime in, please chime in at any point. So we have a 3-3 tie, and it appears that no one is going to change their votes. Okay. So that means we're not going to be appointing anybody to this vacancy this evening. Our next step would be to add the vacancy board chair, who Borough Manager Armstrong, is that Sonia Brown? Okay. So we'll have to contact Sonia, and we'll have 30 days, if my recollection is correct, to revote with the addition of the vacancy board chair. I think that our solicitors. That's not quite yet, I think. Yeah. We could have, right, we could have a special meeting of council and have council revote. I imagine we'd probably be at the same point. Right. Okay. All right. Well, some of you may have to go through this again, but once the vacancy board chair is available. And again, thank you for being here this evening. Free to stick around as we go through the rest of our agenda. One of you may very well be on council next time we roll around, but we'll move on to our regular business. Okay. Why don't we take 10 minutes? Okay. Thank you.